The Laughing Empire. In the late 1930s, as Europe stood on the brink of war, Germany was an industrial powerhouse. Precision engineering, steel production, and machine design, these were the pride of the Reich. Factories roared with the sound of presses and welders. Everything was built by hand, measured by men, lifted by men. Efficiency through discipline, perfection through manpower. That was the German way. Across the ocean, America's factories were different. Not as strict, not as centralized, but deeply innovative. They had something Germany didn't value: machines that did the lifting for them. Forklifts. To the German mind, it was ridiculous. Why would you let a machine do what a soldier or worker could do faster, with pride? German officers scoffed at the sight of American workers riding small industrial trucks to lift crates. It looked lazy. It looked inefficient. But those small machines, ugly, loud, and clumsy, would soon become one of the silent weapons that helped America win the greatest war in history. The forgotten weapon of industry. The forklift was not a glamorous invention. It didn't fire bullets or drop bombs. It was born in warehouses and shipping docks, where time and energy mattered more than glory. The first motorized lift trucks appeared around 1917 during World War I, but it was World War II that made them essential. When the U.S. began ramping up production for war, every factory, port, and supply depot faced the same challenge. How do you move millions of tons of material fast enough to feed a global war machine? Before forklifts, loading a single cargo ship could take days, hundreds of men, ropes, and sweat. With forklifts and standardized pallets, that same job took hours. Forklifts transformed Americans' logistics from slow and human-dependent to mechanized and unstoppable. Factories could now load trucks faster. Rail depots could send out shipments around the clock, and ports could handle cargo at record speed. Every tank, every bullet, every ration moved by a machine Germans once mocked.
The arsenal of democracy moves on wheels. When Franklin D. Roosevelt promised to make America the arsenal of democracy, few understood what that truly meant. Yes, it meant factories. Yes, it meant workers, but it also meant mobility. America's strength was not just in building weapons, it was in moving them. By 1943, American industry was producing one plane every 5 minutes, one tank every 30 minutes, and one ship every day. The secret behind this impossible rhythm wasn't just manpower, it was the efficiency of movement. Forklifts allowed factories to maintain continuous assembly lines. They let trains be loaded and unloaded without delay. They kept ports like New York, San Francisco, and Norfolk running like clockwork. Germany, meanwhile, relied heavily on human labor. Its workers and soldiers manually handled crates, shells, and barrels. It was an empire obsessed with perfection, but not with speed. And in a war of machines, speed meant life. Normandy's hidden hero. June 1944. Normandy. The beaches were chaos. Men, trucks, tanks, and supplies clogged every inch of sand. Fuel, ammunition, food, everything had to move fast. And there they were, forklifts rolling off landing craft alongside jeeps and bulldozers. The U.S. Army's Engineering Corps deployed hundreds of them to the beaches. Small, rugged, and easy to repair, they became essential in unloading landing craft and moving vital supplies inland. While German artillery pounded the beaches, forklifts worked in silence, unseen, uncelebrated, but vital. They built the supply lines that allowed the Allies to keep advancing day after day. Each box lifted, each crate stacked, was one more step toward Berlin.
The Logistics War. Historians often talk about the Battle of Stalingrad, the Blitz, and the Battle of the Bulge. But few mention the war that happened behind the front lines, the Logistics War. The Allies won not only because of bravery and strategy, but because they could supply faster than the Axis could destroy. American forces could replace a destroyed tank in days. Germany might take weeks. Ammunition, fuel, rations, all flowed from massive depots powered by forklifts and conveyor systems. A single American supply base in England could handle more tonnage in a week than Germany could move in a month. The Luftwaffe could bomb ports, U-boats could sink ships, but they couldn't stop the American machine because it was mobile, adaptable, and relentless. The humble forklift was a small cog in that great engine, but remove it and the entire system would grind to a halt. Germany's blind spot. Inside occupied Europe, the Germans had built some of the most advanced weapons of the war: jet fighters, V-2 rockets, and deadly tanks. But their factories still depended on human chains to move heavy loads. Even when forklifts appeared in American footage, Nazi propaganda dismissed them as inefficient. One German engineer wrote in 1943, "The Americans prefer mechanical toys over discipline. They forget that a man can do better what a machine tries to imitate." That arrogance came at a cost. When Allied bombers destroyed bridges and rail lines, German supply lines froze. Their supplies depended on manual labor, easily disrupted, easily delayed. Meanwhile, American depots could adapt instantly. Forklifts could reroute cargo, shift supplies, and reload trucks anywhere, anytime. Germany had underestimated not a weapon, but a philosophy: the belief that machines should serve men, not replace them. But America had no such pride. It let machines take the load, and in doing so, built an unstoppable war economy. The human factor. There was another hidden effect. Forklifts reduced the need for heavy manual labor, allowing more men to fight at the front. Women and older workers took over logistics jobs back home, operating the machines with precision. The Rosie the Riveters didn't just build planes, they drove forklifts, loaded trucks, and kept the factories moving. Every lift saved strength. Every machine hour gave soldiers more bullets, more food, more time. War is often remembered for its battles, but in the shadows of warehouses, another army worked, silent, unseen, and crucial.
victory on the docks. By 1945, America's logistic network was a marvel of efficiency. Forklifts moved supplies from coast to coast, feeding the Pacific and European fronts. Each day, millions of tons rolled through supply chains that never stopped. When Germany finally fell, its officers were stunned at how fast the Allies could move. Captured records show reports of disbelief. The Americans move material faster than we can even count it. Forklifts, once mocked as a lazy man's tool, had become a symbol of industrial strength. They turned America's economy into a living organism, fast, efficient, and resilient. And in the process, they redefined modern warfare forever. After the war. When the war ended, the world had changed. Factories rebuilt, ports reopened, and the forklift, once a niche invention, became the backbone of modern industry. Germany, now in ruins, imported American forklifts to rebuild its own cities. The same machines that helped them defeat them were now helping them rise again. In post-war Europe, American forklifts became a symbol of modernization and recovery. They were no longer laughed at, they were copied. The Marshall Plan brought thousands of them overseas. In every rebuilt warehouse, in every reopened dockyard, there was a quiet echo of that wartime lesson. Efficiency wins wars.
The legacy of movement. Today, forklifts are everywhere, from Amazon warehouses to military bases. Their design has barely changed, because their purpose hasn't. They represent a principle the Germans never understood during the war. The technology, no matter how small or simple, can change the course of history. In World War II, the Allies had planes, ships, and tanks, but without logistics, they were useless. And logistics ran on wheels, small, humble wheels that lifted the world's mightiest arsenal. So when the Germans laughed at forklifts, they laughed at the very machine that would carry America to victory. The machine that built the modern world. The guns of World War II fell silent, but the machines that won it kept on moving. Across America, the same factories that once built tanks and jeeps began producing cars, washing machines, and televisions. The same ports that shipped rifles now shipped food and aid. And in every warehouse, every dockyard, every air base, the forklift stood waiting. What began as a wartime necessity had become a peacetime revolution. For the first time in history, entire economies could move goods faster than they could be consumed. Retail chains, global shipping, and modern consumer culture all were built on the rhythm of the forklift's engine. Germany rebuilt with forklifts. Japan industrialized with forklifts. The Soviet Union copied the design for its own logistics. Even the smallest nations adopted them, because no nation wanted to be slow again. Every box lifted became a symbol of recovery. Every warehouse floor hummed with the same sound that once echoed through the American war machine. The forklift had proven something eternal, that power is not only in destruction, but in motion. And though few remember it, that small, rumbling machine changed how the world lives, works, and fights forever. Because victory in war fades with time,
but efficiency endures.
The echo of movement. 80 years have passed since the last battles of World War II. The weapons have rusted. The generals are long gone. But the machines of movement, they never stopped. Today, in the vast warehouses of Amazon, FedEx, and Tesla, the heartbeat of war logistics still echoes. Forklifts glide across polished floors, carrying crates of electronics instead of ammunition. Automated systems replace soldiers, but the mission remains the same. Move fast, move smart, move more. Every modern supply chain, every cargo plane, every shipping container, every global delivery route carries within it the DNA of that wartime innovation, the belief that motion itself can be a weapon. The U.S. military still depends on it. Forklifts load humanitarian aid in disaster zones. They supply bases in deserts and snowfields, where speed decides survival. Quietly, they remain the unspoken soldiers of every operation. In an age of artificial intelligence, drones, and automation, the forklift stands as a humble ancestor, a reminder that every great victory begins with a single idea. Make work faster, make effort smaller, make progress unstoppable. The Germans once laughed at that idea. They saw only the weakness in convenience, never the strength in efficiency. But when the smoke cleared, it was the side that lifted faster, moved smarter, and believed in machines that stood victorious. The war ended decades ago, yet the lesson endures. It's not just about who fights hardest, but who moves best. And somewhere, in the quiet hum of a warehouse, the spirit of that wartime forklift still carries the world forward. One pallet, one victory, one revolution at a time. From battlefields to the stars. When the war ended, the world divided, east versus west. But behind every flag, behind every ideology, one truth remained. Whoever controlled logistics controlled the future. America had learned that lesson in blood and steel. Germany had learned it in defeat, and the Soviet Union was determined never to be outmoved again. Factories in Detroit and Pittsburgh didn't go silent, they evolved. The same supply systems that once delivered bombs now delivered prosperity. Assembly lines grew longer, more complex. The forklift became the symbol of a new kind of power, economic dominance. In the 1950s, as America raced into the Cold War, forklifts helped build bases from Alaska to Okinawa. They moved missiles, engines, and crates of classified parts. And when the space race began, those same principles of speed and mobility launched men toward the heavens. At Cape Canaveral, forklifts carried rocket components, oxygen tanks, and computer modules, the invisible hands behind the space dream. Every successful launch depended not just on genius, but on timing, precision, and movement. The spirit of wartime logistics had gone cosmic. Meanwhile, Germany, rebuilt and reborn, embraced the very thing it once mocked. In the ruins of Hamburg and Frankfurt, new industries rose powered by forklifts and automated loading systems. What had once been a weapon of their enemy had become a foundation of their rebirth. By the 1960s, global trade had exploded. Cargo ships grew larger, air freight took flight, and in every port and hangar, the forklift stood quietly, connecting continents, powering economies, linking a fractured world together. The same machine that once fed a war now fed the world, no longer a symbol of conflict, but of civilization in motion.
The global supply empire. By the 1970s, the world was no longer divided by trenches or battlefields, but by trade routes. The wars of machines had turned into wars of markets. And once again, the victors were not those with the biggest armies, but those who could move the fastest. From New York to Singapore, from Hamburg to Tokyo, new giants rose. Massive shipping ports, container yards, and automated warehouses. They looked nothing like the war factories of the 1940s, but their heartbeat was the same. The forklift had become their soldier, the container their weapon, and logistics their strategy. The idea was born from war, standardization. Every shell, every bomb, every ration in World War II had been packed in precise sizes, stacked in predictable shapes. Now, the world adopted that logic for peace. Steel containers replaced wooden crates. Forklifts and cranes replaced dockside labor. Ships could be loaded in hours, not days. It was the second logistics revolution, a quiet echo of the first, forged in wartime necessity. The same spirit that had fueled America's victory now powered globalization. Nations began to measure their strength not in tanks or troops, but in tonnage and throughput. How many containers could you move in a day? How many ships could your ports feed? How fast could your economy flow? Every forklift became a cell in a vast, living organism, the global supply empire. Wars faded, borders softened, but the hunger for efficiency remained endless. Factories in Asia fed stores in America. European machines built African roads. And in every shadowed warehouse, the hum of forklifts still whispered the same truth learned long ago on the beaches of Normandy. He who moves fastest rules the world. The machine that once carried bombs now carried humanity's ambitions, not to destroy, but to connect. A new kind of empire had emerged, not an empire of soldiers, but an empire of movement.
The machine that never slept. It began in the shadows of factories, a small machine built to lift what men could not. It had no weapon, no flag, no glory. Just steel arms, turning gears, and the quiet hum of purpose. When the world plunged into chaos, it rolled into war, unnoticed, uncelebrated. It carried the weight of empires, lifting the bones of victory, one crate at a time. Men fought and died on the front lines, but behind them, in the smoke and dust, the forklifts never stopped. They fed the hungry engines of freedom. They turned mountains of steel into rivers of supply. They were the pulse of the arsenal of democracy, the heartbeat that never faltered. When the Germans laughed, they laughed at a future they couldn't yet see. A world where strength was no longer measured by muscle, but by motion. That laugh has long since faded, but the sound of those engines, steady, eternal, still echoes. In every warehouse, in every port, in every city, where goods move faster than thought. The war ended, the soldiers went home, but the forklift never slept. It built the post-war world. It lifted nations from ruin. It carried humanity from industry to information, from the battlefield to the stars. It is still here, a quiet witness to everything we've become. A reminder that progress doesn't roar like a tank, it hums like a motor in the dark. Because history isn't always written by those who fight. Sometimes it's written by those who keep things moving. And so, in the grand story of war and peace, the forklift stands as one of humanity's most faithful soldiers, never honored, never remembered, but always there. Silent, tireless, lifting the world forward.